Hi, I'm Peter Wooding. In this week's Christian Weekly News, we report on two significant abortion debates. One looking at the use of graphic abortion imagery outside abortion clinics. The other discussing the issue of doctors who were prepared to allow abortions on the basis of the gender of the baby. We also bring you highlights from an event that marked the launch of a new book, Christians in the Firing Line, and a Christian publishing house, Wilberforce Publications. And we're joined by Miles Monroe, well-known author and speaker, talking about national transformation. Two leading figures in the abortion debate went head-to-head last week at an event organised by Christian Concern, discussing the issue of using graphic abortion imagery outside abortion clinics. Here's some of the highlights of that event. Anne Farady, CEO of the UK's largest private abortion provider, BPAS, and Greg Cunningham, Executive Director of the Centre for Bioethical Reform, went head-to-head in a 2-hour debate at the Emmanuel Christian Centre over the issue of whether it's right to use graphic abortion imagery outside UK abortion clinics. The motion debated was, this House believes that it's morally wrong for groups to approach women and display abortion imagery outside facilities which provide abortion services. Ms Farady acknowledged that the pictures are disturbing and called the displays outside abortion clinics inhumane and reprehensible, believing them to be morally wrong.
I'm just asking you to think morally about why you do it. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why I draw the distinction, is because, those pictures, of course they are really upsetting. They really are. And they're horrible. And I find it disturbing, actually, that anybody wants to show them. And I can tell you, no woman ever wants to go through that. You don't have to, she knows what's going on. You don't have to stand outside with a placard and show her. She knows what is going on in that clinic because it is indeed discussed with her. But the point is that she has that abortion, not because she's wanting to have that abortion, but because she has a reason in her life that means that not having the abortion is worse for her than going through that procedure. And that's what you fail to understand, is that it is a procedure that happens in context. And that's why I think your use of these pictures is pornographic and distasteful.
However, taking issue with the displays being called protests, Mr Cunningham said that when a person holds up a picture of an abortion, abortion protests itself.
I think it's immoral to systematically withhold information that were it shared with some women, they would change their minds about aborting. That's what's immoral. That's what's unethical. That's what violates the whole concept, the spirit, the letter of the informed consent requirements that healthcare professionals have. This has become so bizarre. This whole sort of debate, not just here tonight, but in the broader sense, is so bizarre that torturing babies to death isn't immoral, but showing pictures of babies being tortured to death is immoral. It just sort of sucks the wind out of you. What do you even say in the face of that level of moral confusion? Pornography, comparing our pictures to pornography. Pornography dehumanizes human beings. Our pictures humanize human beings. That's a very, very big distinction. We want them to see the whole picture. That's what context is about. These pictures don't decontextualize abortion. These pictures give women the full context so they're able to better decide whether whatever it is that's causing them to consider an abortion is worth what the abortion is going to do to the baby. Ms. Farady says that these women know what's going to go on. I think at some level she's right. At some level I'll concede the point that God writes his truth even on the unregenerate heart. Everyone can intuit that abortion at some level is evil, but almost nobody understands how evil until they actually see it because it's inexpressibly evil.
The debate ended with a vote. 23 attendees thought that it was morally wrong to show pictures of abortions outside clinics, and 117 thought it was not. Last week, MP David Burrowes led a debate in Parliament discussing the issue of doctors who were prepared to allow abortions on the basis of the gender of the baby. To find out more, we spoke to MP David Burrowes.
Yeah, I'm pleased I've secured this debate taking place, which will be focusing on the issue of the policy of prosecutions of offences that contravene the Abortion Act. And that has come about prompted by the Daily Telegraph investigation of gender selection abortions and the decision of the Crown Prosecution Service not to prosecute in those particular cases, which has really opened the door to the issue of really how can we possibly not prosecute cases that are in the public interest, such as when gender selection abortions are authorised by GPs. But also it's really just shone a light into what's going on up and down our country in relation to abortions, where there's effectively no safeguards, and the Abortion Act provisions in relation to having to establish, at the very least, a medical risk to the patient are really just ignored. We have a practice now that we're aware of where there's pre-signed forms for authorisations going through, where the patient doesn't have to have any direct contact with the doctor, and those are examples where in any ordinary procedure, if you're going to a doctor with some flu symptoms, having to get some antibiotics prescribed, or indeed if you wanted to have contraception, you'd have to go through vigorous checks. And how extraordinary that when we're seeking to end life, where there isn't any checks and abortion is allowed to go on effectively on demand. And so I will be seeking to expose that reality and trying to ensure that the Attorney General, Dominic Grieve, does make it crystal clear, as the Department of Health have already said to me, is that yes, they recognise that yes, it's illegal to authorise gender selection abortion, because already that's in doubt. We have the BMA giving guidance saying that, well, in certain circumstances, gender selection is acceptable, which for any right-minded person I would suggest is not. And we need to make sure that if the present legislation does not make it clear, then we need to ensure that Parliament makes it clear and sorts out this current mess, because we're keen to probably preach to the rest of the world about gender equality, and we go on into the international stage to say how important gender equality is, and then we look carefully at what's going on in India and China in relation to the appalling examples that have gone on for so many years in relation to gender selection. And yet, indeed, in places like India, they are trying to make it very clear that this isn't acceptable. They're trying to take active steps, but in our own backyard we have this seemingly going on by default, and we can't let that continue. Well, hopefully it will bring a cross-section of members of Parliament from all political parties, and also across the divide, the usual divide over abortion, to unite and say, well, look, in this example here of gender selection abortion, that is abhorrent, it shouldn't happen, it's illegal. And also they're just recognising that if you aren't to have any restrictions on choice, this is what you have. And so it must make us think clearly that even those parliamentarians who passed the Abortion Act of 1967, even they wouldn't have expected us to be in the sad state we're in today. So I hope that it will lead immediately to the Chief Medical Officer giving clear guidance in relation to this messy area of the law, which is now abused and now open to dishonesty, abuse and exploitation and criminality, and that the Attorney General makes it clear that yes, it is illegal for there to be gender selection abortions, to make sure that there isn't in any way some tolerance of that appalling situation. Well, I think it's important that this opportunity, in a sense, which has come out of a sad state of affairs, is not lost, and that we all recognise that this is an area when we're looking at very practically what is now the implementation. We often talk about our challenging wanting to reduce the time limits and looking at those areas of debate around abortion, but we need to get very practical about what is happening in our GP surgeries, maybe in our own local GP practice. We need to challenge every GP that they are going to at least comply with the law and at least comply with the spirit of the law, which is that a doctor needs to be engaged in this whole issue, that they shouldn't allow this to go by, and that we keep the law. And that's what we should do. And that many of us think the law should be changed in the current state, but at the very least, let's keep the law. So let's pray about that. Let's practically write to our clinical commissioning groups to make sure that they're taking it seriously. And then also urge your members of parliament that they will really take on board this issue and realise that it must be an issue of national importance and not simply turn a blind eye, as seems to be happening in many areas of the country.
Christians who've taken legal action because of discrimination they faced in the workplace joined many other Christians this week for the launch of Wilberforce Publications. Here's some of the highlights of that event that took place at the Emmanuel Christian Centre. The launch of a new book entitled Christians in the Firing Line drew a crowd in London this week. Dr. Richard Scott, the author of the book and a former Christian Legal Centre client, examines 13 cases of Christians who've been warned, blacklisted, suspended or dismissed for refusing to compromise their biblical principles.
Persecution starts with marginalisation. And that's one of the reasons I've written this book, to let people know what is actually happening on the ground, so we can take away opinion. This is fact. But the other reason I've written it, apart from trying to support Christian concern and hopefully make them a little bit of money, is to encourage other Christians to stand up. Because we will all have, each one of us here will have an Esther or a Daniel moment in our lives. All of us. And you know, I put my hand up many times for not standing up for the gospel as a teenager when I was younger. And to be honest, that's not going to happen anymore. It's too important, and the times they are changing. England's not a great country in many ways to be a Christian at work anymore.